class with industry people who are going to a free lunch where they're going to network with a lot of people. If you don't RSVP, your seat's going to get taken. So all you have to do is hit register, that's it, to keep your seat. So if you didn't do it for the boat tour, send me an email immediately, and I'll try to see what we can do with getting you a slot, but I can't guarantee it because that boat only has so many seats on it. Oh, you know. Yeah. So we're going to continue.
All right.
Oh, you don't need it. Well, you can have it.
No.
Okay.
All right. So, back to zoning codes. So, in a form-based code, at least in the ones in Miami, you can regulate it in other ways. The zoning districts are laid out as transects. They're called transect zones. So you will have T1. There's no T2 in Miami, but you could have a T2, T3, T4, T5, T6. T1 is a natural zone. T2 is rural agricultural. T3 is a suburban zone, typically where you have single-family areas. T4 will be a little bit denser, so it'll be townhomes, 2-3-story apartment buildings. T5 is a little denser, typically a 5-story apartment building or a condo or office building. And then T6 is more urban, taller buildings, and then you can break that down in Miami from T6-8 all the way up to T6-80 in downtown, and that basically tells you how tall your building can be.
And these are, like everything else that we're learning, the T's mean, it's the way that the city of Miami, they decided to call it transects, and I think Rogelio will explain why. But they could have just as well called it Zone 1, Zone 2, Zone 3, Zone 4. And everything that we're finding out, right, even when we started talking about property rights, where do they come from? Everything that we're talking about is from an agreement or a consent, right? Because property rights in the U.S. come from a consent that we're all consenting to be governed by the law, and that sets up a property rights structure. And zoning, it just didn't happen, you know, where did the zoning come from? We're learning tonight where the zoning came from. But all of these things are man-made laws that could be changed, right?
Yep. It could be changed, and they do change. In Miami Beach, they change every month.
Right. Somebody might say, well, it's zoned this way. It could never, you might think, well, maybe it'll never change, but it could change, and it changes all the time.
Yep. Every month except August, because the commission doesn't meet in August.
Yeah.
And so that's the way it's structured in Miami. And then you also have D zones, which are districts, so they'll be typically an industrial zone, and they just don't fit into this concept of the transect. The transect is basically you're going from very low densities, natural areas, and up. With the idea the city is laid out in a transect. You start off in the Everglades, and as you work your way in, the density increases until you get to downtown as a transect. So use regulations in a transect, in a Euclidean zone code versus a form-based code. In a Euclidean code, you're going to have districts. In Miami Beach, for example, we have RM1, RM2, which is residential multifamily. You have CD1, which is commercial district 1, commercial district 2. That's how you lay it out in Miami Beach versus Miami, which has a transect. So you have, this is for example, CD3. And you have 4 paragraphs to tell you what you can do in CD3. And in Miami Beach, you have over 20 zones, and each of those zones will have 4 paragraphs that tell you what's a main permitted use, a conditional use, an accessory use, and a prohibited use. So if you want to figure out what you can do with your property, you have to read those 4 paragraphs, generally. There's other places where you have other use restrictions, but generally you're going to have to read those 4 paragraphs. This is another district. Has about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 paragraphs that tell you what you can and can't do if you're in the North Beach Town Center district. So it's very difficult to figure out what you can do. Very difficult for us as planners because it's impossible to memorize all this for 20 different districts, so you've always got to go look through the code. If you go to Miami 21, you have this table that tells you what you can do in the whole city. Very easy to read. The uses are condensed. It's very easy to see what you can do. And if I want to open up a commercial business and I don't know where I should have a commercial business, I can go to commercial, and this lists all of the transects, and I can figure out very quickly where I can do that. In Miami Beach, I need to read through the 20 districts to figure out where I can and can't do that. So then this will tell you, within each T zone, you'll have a letter assigned to it that tells you R, L, or O, which means restricted, limited, or open, and that's how you regulate the uses. And so if the box is empty, you can't do that. If the box says R, you can do it by right. If it says W, it's a warrant, so it has a little bit of a review process, kind of like I was describing a conditional use that we may impose some other conditions to make sure the use fits and doesn't impact the neighborhood. Or an E, which is an exception, which means you have to go before a board to get the use approved, and in which case there's probably an issue with the use that may affect the community, and they want to make sure that that's addressed appropriately. But it's very limited where those E's and W's are compared to Miami Beach. So that's how you regulate uses.
And what you guys could do is, like this class I said is about resources. So some of you might own property in a different county, or some of you might own it here in the city of Miami, or the city of Miami Beach. You can go look up the zoning code. There's a website called Municode, www.municode.com, and you can find the zoning codes of every municipality in the country there. So you can look up the city of Miami zoning code and make that use chart bigger so you can see it. But you can also do it for where you live or where you want to buy property, so you understand what kind of uses are there. And as you start driving around, now that we're taking these classes and we're thinking about this stuff, I think your property eyes are going to start coming on. And you'll see that if you're in a part of the city with all skyscrapers, you'll have an idea that you're in a part that's zoned for really dense areas. Or if you're in a part of the city that is all schools, you might have an idea that that's not in Miami 21. It's probably somewhere you're in a Euclidean type code that has uses separated. So the more that you learn, the more you're going to look at what's surrounding you in a different way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and even though these are telling you the use is allowed, it may have additional regulations that use is allowed, but you have to do certain things. Parking, maybe have screening, have different things for the use. So, but yeah, it's different everywhere you go, and most of them are laid out like this.
Well, basically, going off what you just said, does Hialeah have any strict zoning? Because they look like they're a disaster.
No, they do. I mean, you have commercial corridors where the businesses are, and then behind that you have residential zones.
Because, I drive by there and I see, apartments in front of single families and...
Yeah, no, and you have apartments, it's a single family across the street from a warehouse.
Exactly.
That's the way it's zoned, but it's definitely zoned.
Okay.
It's definitely zoned, and they don't have design criteria that's very specific. It's very vague in terms of, it's a Euclidean code, and it's very vague in what you can and can't do.
They could change.
But they could change it.
You could go to your commissioners if you're there and say that you're interested in, changing the zoning for a particular district.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you don't live in the area, are you allowed to do that? To voice your opinion?
Anybody can voice your opinion, but it's up to the commission as to whether they want to listen to you or not. Typically, they will require you to state your name and address.
Right.
So if I go to a city of Miami meeting and I say I live in Miami Springs, they're not going to listen to me.
But maybe you live in one place and you're a property owner, another place, you own
Yeah, it's
a
an
property.
investment property.
But if I say, hey, I own several properties here, I own this property, then they'll probably listen to you. They'll listen to you. You definitely have the right to speak. Anybody has the right to speak in those meetings. And email and everything to your commission. So T3, like I said, suburban, single family. I won't go into too much detail on these. T4, small apartment buildings. These are examples of what they would be in Miami Beach. T6. And then in a form-based code, you'll have basically tables like this that tell you the scale of the building, different setbacks that you'll have, and it's very easy to read, whereas in Miami Beach, this would all be in text. It will be in paragraph form, and it's very difficult to determine what's allowed. And so here, for example, you have this is T6, the highest density, and it tells you if you have T6 next to a T3, which is a single-family home, which it's possible that you have the one next to the other, the T6 needs to have several setbacks as you go taller to keep the height of the building away from the single-family neighborhood and impacting the single-family neighborhood, versus T6 next to T4, it's not as much, and if it's T6 next to T6, then you can go straight up. because you're not going to be impacting the properties around you, because they're theoretically going to look the same or be allowed to be of a similar size. This is what I was describing in terms of transition. So this is the type of building we would have today that was built under a previous code, where you didn't care about the look of the building, where you'd have this tall tower structure next to this little single-family neighborhood. If we had a form-based code, we'd probably have a regulation that said they'd have to step to the side, and it would be more like this. So that these guys aren't looking right into this guy's backyard. They have, there's a little bit of a transition, and they're not impacting each other. You're protecting each other's property rights. Again, this describes that again in more detail. I don't need to detail that. So the idea would be different properties next to different types of properties. You would basically regulate the mass and the form of the building in a very detailed way, describing the setbacks like this. And then another issue that you want to regulate is the street experience, when you're walking, what it looks like. One thing we don't want to see is this condition where you have driveways next to the sidewalk. So if you're walking down this street here, very dangerous condition. One of these cars can just back up out and run you over. Florida is the worst state for pedestrians, and by far in the country. Another issue here is the sidewalk. If you notice, is at an angle for these cars, so we don't want to have driveways everywhere. Very minimal driveways. So in a form-based code, we would regulate that. Miami Beach is technically allowed, but through our negotiation process, with new development, we get them to do other things. But in Miami, it's just regulated. So you have to do it, and if you don't do it, you can't build it. So just do it. So we want to improve safety, pedestrian safety. Have active uses on the street. You don't want to have parking lots, parking garages facing the sidewalk. So this is a much nicer place to walk with trees. Regulate the amount of trees and make you have trees. Again, this is an example of what we don't want: parking lots and obnoxious. This is really ugly signage. We don't want to have this anymore. This was allowed at one point, so new regulations limit this.
Do you guys think it's fair for them to regulate the signs or the parking?
Yes.
Because they want to keep the value and the aesthetics of the community. And if you want to work there and make money and have your business there, then you need to abide by your zoning restrictions.
I agree. The purpose of zoning is really to increase property values, right, in a coordinated way, in an organized way.
I'm not sure why that thing keeps popping up, but that's an example of the way regulations would make the street frontage look better. That little box up there. Shade structures, trees, windows. It starts off like this, and we want to have wider sidewalks as much as possible. So this is another bad example. This is a bank on Alton Road in Miami Beach. Just huge driveways. So cars, you deposited your check or you took some money out, you're excited, and you're booking through there to go party or whatever, and then somebody gets run over. Very, very bad condition. You don't want to have this type of condition. Another bad example, this is what we want to see. My bad Photoshop skills. Here, this type of, you have a little grassy strip. It'd be better if they provided this as a sidewalk. So we'd want to encourage them on their own property to have public space, public use space on their property. So we would want this area to be added to the sidewalk, part of the sidewalk. In Miami 21, you have a 10-foot setback, which means your building can't start for the first 10 feet. But those 10 feet need to be treated as if it were sidewalk or sidewalk cafe area where you could walk on, so that the pedestrian environment is much safer, because the goal is to encourage people to walk as much as possible. We're not going to achieve 100% of walking, but we want people to walk as much as possible so there's less cars on the road and less traffic as we develop.
Isn't that changing Miami? I thought in Miami nobody likes to walk.
Historically, nobody likes to walk, but if you come downtown, you see a lot more people walking than you did before.
And that's because of the change in the zoning code is making these uses more active and walking experience better.
If you
And
look
the
at
traffic is horrible.
the traffic is horrible, but it could have been a lot worse. So if you look at East Brickell, here where we are along the water, it's older buildings, and they have fences on their frontage, they have parking, there's no retail on the ground floor of most of these buildings. They're single use. Typically you'll have an office in one building, you'll have residential or condo in the other, and they don't mix. So you have to drive. If you live in this part of Brickell, to get to a grocery store, you need to drive to the grocery store. Versus if you live in West Brickell, towards Miami Avenue, you can walk to everything. You have stores, you have shops. Those are newer buildings designed more in this fashion. There's retail, there's restaurants, there's all sorts of things everywhere, and you don't have to drive to get to everything. And it makes it also easier to have public transportation. We have Metro Mover over there. If people are able to walk, people are more likely to use public transportation versus an area where it's difficult to walk. You're not going to want to walk to the public transportation.
And it's a big change, right? Because when I became an attorney, I worked at 701 Brickell, and that was like 15 years ago. And there was nowhere to go. There was nowhere to live. And there was nothing to do in the evening here. So this, this change, a lot of these buildings came online in the last downturn, 2006, 2007.
Yeah.
And then we're in another boom now where a lot of buildings are coming online again, but it's as if a whole city grew up downtown where we never had a city before. So we're seeing again that area has really changed. In Miami, they changed more than most places, right? And on the boat tour, we're going to have the executive director of the Downtown Development Authority with us. And we're gonna have some reports for you and all those types of things. So we're gonna talk a lot about the change and the growth of a whole population of people in downtown Miami that, nobody ever thought. I shouldn't have been working in that law firm. I should have been buying all the property outside of it, right? So you have to have a vision of what, it was cheap back then, yeah.
So then in the form-based code, you have a concept of layers. I won't get into too much detail on it, but that basically describes where your building has to be located, what area has to be sidewalk, what area has to be public. So basically, second layer has to be habitable space. So we want to see building up against the sidewalk. You have a little bit of a setback, which we would want to be in addition to the sidewalk. And then your parking can be located anywhere within the third layer. Doesn't have to be, it can be building, but it can't be located beyond that point, so that you have the active street frontage, walkability, and all these other concepts that we want to encourage. Another thing that we don't want to allow for is, we have transparency requirements. Like I said, you have to have glass, so we don't want this condition. Nobody wants to be in an area without windows. This is a building in Miami Beach. If you're walking here, you don't see anything. Is that interesting to you? It's not as safe because if you're walking, nobody can see you if they're inside of a building. So we would want there to be windows. Here's a good example. This is a Walgreens that they've put windows. Walgreens typically likes to build a box with windows way up high because they want to put shelves up against the wall. So we make them put windows in Miami Beach. And now Walgreens is changing their model because they're seeing people actually like this better, and they're going into their old stores and putting windows, where historically they didn't like to do that. This is a CVS on Alton Road. See, the windows are high because they wanted to maximize their shelf space. But for a pedestrian here, this is awful. I took this picture when Alton Road was still under construction. So we would want to see this. Much more enjoyable for somebody walking there, seeing what they have to sell, see that there's actually people inside, and encourage people to go into the business. This is another example of massing, how I was describing earlier, how we want buildings that are higher to respect the buildings that are lower with transitions. So almost done. Miami in 2004, a couple buildings. This is 2010, and it's already changed beyond this. There's a lot of buildings that aren't in this picture. Totally different area. You've got to learn from your past. Does anybody know what city this is? It's downtown Miami with streetcars. Look at people walking everywhere. The streets are crowded. And this is kind of what we want downtown Miami to be again. It was originally the center of the city. Once they started building malls in the 60s and 70s, it started sucking away a lot of the potential from downtown and a lot of the businesses downtown. We got rid of the streetcars in the 1940s. But Miami had an amazing public transportation system that went all over town that we got rid of. So we want to learn from this and go back to this way, because what we've created with Euclidean zoning has really created a lot of traffic, a lot of congestion, and a lot of problems that is very difficult to solve now that they didn't have back then. And look at the street. It looks like it's New York, or it looks like it's San Francisco or another city, and that's Flagler Street.
Wow.
So, some other form-based codes that exist, Miami, obviously Miami 21, Philadelphia has just adopted one recently, Denver, Colorado has one. Seaside, Florida, which is, if you've ever seen the movie The Truman Show, that is Seaside, Florida. That is the first form-based code ever done. And their architects are actually from Miami. Dwayne Plater Zyberk, they're an architecture firm from Miami, and they came up with this concept. So Miami, actually, believe it or not, is at the forefront of urban planning. And then Miami-Dade County has some in certain neighborhoods, urban zones near the metro rail stations typically. And some other areas, so some cities might have a Euclidean code, but they may designate a form-based code in a specific area. So these cities have a zone form-based code in a specific district. The county, like I said, has them in specific districts, and then Cincinnati is currently working on one. And that's it.
Do you have any more questions for Rogelio?
What about the proposal of sending the Metro Mover to from downtown to Miami Beach? That is possible or no?
It won't be the Metro Mover, it'll be a different type of system, a light rail, more like the streetcar here, but a little more modern. A lot more modern than this one. On tracks on the street. But Boston has it, yeah, a bunch of cities have them. Miami used to have them. So it would be more like that. It's definitely feasible, and we're working on it, and we hope to get it done in our lifetime.
Yeah.
Another question. Miami 21 covers the city of Miami and the city of Miami Beach only.
No,
Only Miami.
City of Miami.
Only the
And
city
the
of
reason, one of the reasons the city of Miami Beach wanted to bring Rogelio over is because Miami 21 has been such a success. So the city of Miami Beach is trying to move in that direction, but they're not there yet.
Yeah, we've had issues because the residents like the negotiating process.
Less
So-
transparent.
Yeah, they like the fight. They enjoy it. So it's, every city's different. There's different community, different needs, different way of doing things, and that's the beauty of having 35 different cities in this county is there's room for everybody.
And it's also seeing due process in action. Because a zoning change, I had a client, they engaged me, it was back around 2011, to sell some land for them that was on the river. And they thought that they could build 64 units per acre, but the zoning change meant that they could build like 30, 32. So a zoning change can really impact your property, and they were out-of-state owners and they didn't follow they weren't participating in the process. So they were surprised to learn that there was a zoning change. But in the U.S., they can't just change what you can do with your property. You have to go through, public notice, public hearings, all sorts of meetings. So it's actually part of the protection, and that's part of the due process that we see in action.
Yeah, we have these are the cities of Dade County, and so Miami's this blue one, Miami Beach is the pink one, and each of these will have their own zoning code, and the county, which covers the gray areas, has their own zoning code as well.
And do you believe, because you have also experience on these matters, that you can get more improvements for the Miami 21? Do you think it has reached the top improvement compared to the Euclid code?
Definitely much better than the Euclid code. I'm not going to say Miami 21 is perfect. It still needs improvements and amendments that the city works on, changing it all the time. Zoning is a fluid process. Sometimes you realize, hey, this didn't work, and you have to change. You have to acknowledge that and change certain things. So definitely, I think it's 1,000,000 times better than the old code that Miami had before. But definitely has room for improvements in a lot of areas.
In that place, you believe it's going to expand in other counties in the South Florida area? Or they don't want it? For example, there's the area Pinecrest.
Mm-hmm.
I live close there. Just for the record, I'm asking. Do you think there's
A lot of areas don't need it. Pinecrest is not an area that wants to change. Pinecrest is happy being where they are, and so there's not going to be a whole lot of redevelopment in Pinecrest, so Pinecrest really doesn't need it. There's not much growth happening there.
Oh, it got my attention, the mixed use, because in my country, I'm from Greece,
Mhm.
we have the mixed use everywhere, and we enjoy that, we
Yeah.
have get used to it. And I see in South Miami, for example, in Pinecrest, they have only residents, and then if you want to go to a public or something, you have to drive, which is not very convenient.
But I think
Yeah.
And
in
like-
your country, the city was probably built before the use of the car, right?
No, we have many similarities now. I'm listening to the zoning code. It's like we have identical stuff. I don't know much about zoning in my country, just the basics. And I only see this great difference with the mixed use and shop here, house here, so everything is convenient for everybody. And it is strange for me. I mean,
It's changing that in several, in Miami and Miami Beach allow mixed use. In several areas, it's controversial because the residents feel that it's gonna bring a lot of people to their neighborhood and they don't want it. And so it's controversial and it's a public process. I can't just go and decide I want this to be mixed use as a city planner. We need to go and we have elected officials and it's up to them to make that decision and it's a public process. So in a lot of areas, it's a fight. So South Miami has a great downtown that has mixed use. On Sunset Drive, you have some apartments that have been opening up and condos, and it works very well there. Coral Gables is another one that has a great downtown with great mixed use. But ask the residential neighborhoods of Coral Gables or the single family areas if they want mixed use, and you're gonna get an absolutely not. We love it the way it is. So it's there's room for everything.
it's
Yeah.
innovation. When Miami 21 compared to the other states, I assume it's innovation, right?
Oh yeah,
They
yeah.
don't have it anywhere else in the States.
Well, you
I mean,
know, New York was kind of developed with mixed use in mind anyway, because it was developed before the
Before the car.
automobile. So we see cities where there's more mixed use, but they might not have a form-based code, it's just because the way the city.
And some areas with Euclidean codes may allow for some mixed use. They don't necessarily prohibit it. For typically commercial residential, they'll allow for that to be combined. But it's tougher. It's just tougher to develop.
People like it, like they don't have to use a car. How many people, I mean, I know there must be some people in class that you work downtown and you can come to class. Or you live downtown, work downtown, and can come to class downtown. And, you know, we opened this campus, I think, in 2011. Before that, you know, we didn't have we rented space. We didn't really have an urban campus. So it's part of that as well, you know, to be able to do everything in one place.
You promote bicycles too right now.
Yeah,
I see a
definitely.
little people.
There's bicycle parking requirements in Miami 21. All development has, you have to have one bicycle space for every 20 vehicle spaces, and so there's bicycle parking requirements. And then they're encouraging building bike lanes and the city bikes. So definitely, that's something we're definitely encouraging.
Did you have Anelli?
Yeah, I live in North Bay Village and I've been to some of the commission meetings. I'm in the beautification board. And what I see is that sometimes the mayor and the commissioners want to, you know, make the area more urban and stuff like that, but the people who come to the meetings are more like elderly and they want to keep it the same, they don't want it to change. So if they can get the younger people in that would want to see these changes, it would be easier for them, but it's like their hands are tied.
Well, a lot of young people are not politically active. They just think
I
that
don't know if you
they're,
see
they
that.
I agree.
They do, right?
Don't care.
Or they go, or a lot of
The
people
elderly
just,
people wanted to see
they
it the
think
same.
that their vote doesn't count, their voice doesn't count. So a lot of people give up their rights. It's part of a property right to be able to go and state what you want to your elected officials, and not just to have something happen. But a lot of people give up that right. Yes.
I grew up in Coconut Grove, and like all the time that I've lived there, it's always been like a feud with the city of Miami. You know, starting with CocoWalk, then it was the Home Depot, and then now the big area that's going on the on Bayshore. I guess that would be an example where the zoning changes, I guess, have benefited the community in itself, despite the fact that all of the residents want to maintain that old vibe. But I guess in the case of Home Depot, if it were to be, you know, a little bit further inland than US 1, then I guess I could see how the residents would be kind of angry, you know. You don't want to see, you know, pickup trucks and everything coming into your neighborhood, you know, kind of like changes the aesthetic, especially when your property values.
Are you referring to the article?
The one on US 1?
No, the growth.
Whenever that was built, that was redone on the old code, so it was all a negotiation process.
They tried to bring a Home Depot into Miami Beach and people voted against it. I would have loved it because then I could have had everything in my house fixed all the time and now I have to plan to drive to some Home Depot far away. So
The people in the Grove always fight so hard and they never win.
They do. I mean, there's a lot of restrictions in the Grove.
Yeah,
There's what's called a neighborhood conservation district,
yeah.
which limits the scale of the Grove and limits demolition of old buildings in the Grove. Requires the trees and all the stuff that you see.
Yeah, that's crazy.
David,
Yes, like the article that you sent about Coral Gables not allowing all the SUVs parked overnight. Can you provide other examples of things or, I don't know, any other items that could decrease the property value?
well that rule's actually been overturned because you can have a pickup truck in your yard now. And that was an old vestige of the idea that only people with pickup trucks were workers and that would decrease property value. That was just what some people thought a long time ago.
Right. Any other things that are still
They, what?
Coin laundries? No, Ventura, there are no.
Coin laundries that's not the same as a pickup truck because the coin laundries are used. But, you know, I think in Coral Gables, they also regulate the color that you paint your house.
Yes.
So, like those types of things, they have a lot of more regulation.
Right.
Could you go back one slide? Because I want to ask about the difference the other way. So the difference between the Miami-Dade zoning codes are different from the municipalities. And I think I was seeing that with the county codes that they're not necessarily using form all around, it's only in specific areas.
Specific, correct. Typically, they have a Euclidean code, but they do have a form-based code for certain areas, typically where they want to encourage some redevelopment near the metro rail stops. So downtown Dadeland is the best example of a form-based code. That whole area has been redeveloping by the metro rail station down there. And you can see there's retail, it's walkable, there's big sidewalks, condos on top of the retail, new office buildings, and that type of stuff. So it's,
Will they, is there any consideration for like expanding that beyond the urban centers within the county code or?
They've looked at it. It's just tough because the county is so big.
Right.
So coming up with a form for the whole county is tough. They've definitely looked at it because the county code is very old and very tough to read and enforce and review. But it's a controversial. Whenever you change your zoning, it's controversial, and you have 1 million people that live outside of a city in the unincorporated areas of the county. So dealing with 1 million people to change the whole code at the same time is going to be tough. So I would see it more of a piecemeal. They'll pick an area here and there where they do it to make it manageable because it would be tough to do it.
Well, what about the charrettes? Don't the charrettes state?
Yeah, that's whenever they do a form-based code, they will do a charrette. So whenever they implement one, they will do a charrette is a community meeting where you want input from the public. We do that a lot when we're planning it for an area that we expect there to be change or redevelopment. And so we'll bring maps and we'll have people color and what they want to see and what is the problems with their neighborhood, where they want their neighborhood to go, where they see their neighborhood in the future. So definitely the county does that whenever they want to implement the form-based code.
So, like, from Florida, is there a specific site where you could identify, for example, the large-scale industrial zoning, which is what I'm interested in? Is there a site that could identify all the zoning in Florida for each county?
For each county? No, you have to go to the website of each county, and probably in many cases each city. in Miami-Dade, we are somewhat lucky that the county, where'd it go? Did I pass it? The county gives you an idea of what the zoning is in all of the cities. If I passed it. So you can look at this map and figure out more or less what's industrial. Typically the industrial is gray. It's hard to see the gray, but you can see in the cities where there's gray zoning and see that that's industrial.
Is there a code for it in each, is there a specific code for that, industrial color?
It's not, typically industrial is gonna be gray or purple, but
it's not like a code like RG, like for example.
it depends on the city, like in Miami it's D1 and D2. D2 is the heavy industrial.
All of Florida.
There's nothing that has all of Florida. It's too big. 67 counties and everybody has their 67 counties, and each county has a bunch of cities, and each city has their own code. Coordinating it all would be tough. I don't think so. I've never seen one that's the whole state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And industrial is one of the most regulated areas, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the area, but yes.
We may see some industrial in the river port if we are on time, because sometimes we get to go up to the terminals. I think this will be the last question, Luz.
I recommended to go to each site and register for the newsletter, and you will receive what's going on with the zoning. If they're going to do something, so you know what happened, and then you have a vision where you can invest. So I receive like one letter per month probably from zoning and planning. So what happened in Doral, because I registered in Doral, or I registered in my Coconut Grove or anything. So I keep informed all the time.
On the city website?
You can go to the 21, they have one newsletter, you register, and also they always have planning and zoning in Miami, so it's different that you have to register.
If you register in Miami Beach, you're gonna get a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Everything.
I get a lot of stuff.
We notice everything, so be warned.
Yeah, but they have to, because it's a process, and if they don't notice it, we on Miami Beach will complain and tell them that they can't have the meeting because they didn't provide the right due process, and they have to do it again.
Yeah. Sorry, last question. In your office, in your office or like the city commissioner, are there ever conflicting ideas like within the?
No, they always agree.
No, it's harmony.
Yeah, right. So you think it like it really, I guess, it would take
The city
things.
commissioners anywhere, just like politicians, right? They're elected, and their background might not be zoning. Just
Exactly.
like a person who's elected to be the president of a condominium association board, right? Their background might not be zoning, it might be something entirely different, right? They might never have even taken a real estate class, and then, or maybe they just took the Florida Realtor course, and then they're making the decisions on what's gonna happen. So it's really important that you vote and you're active, or even that you run for office if you have this type of education. We're not leaving. We're gonna see a class picture with our guest speaker, and then we're gonna go over our best answers. The best answers are the best answers of the study questions, and then we're gonna leave. So we want to give our guest a gift from FIU, so thank you for joining us. I have some land use maps, so we're going to take a picture of some of our maps, and we'll do it over here. We'll do it with the FIU in the background, and I forgot to take a class picture of me. But if you guys want to see, you can have maps made. If you guys want to see the maps, you can look at them. You know, I'm not going to keep them here any longer. And I actually think because we didn't take dinner, we ended up doing more than we normally do. I don't know that that's... What? You did? You gave them to me a long time ago, and I got them laminated. So this is my City of Miami, amended in 2011. But so let's all get together and take the class program.
Yeah, it's 2021 passed 3-2.
Yeah.
So 2 commissioners disagreed.
Great.
Come on, everybody, let's get together.
Can you get this logbook in there?
don't mind sharing?
Yeah, it might, it's heavy, I'm not sure how to make it, but we can figure out a way. We're gonna trade on and off.
Hopefully that.
So you'll be in it. We'll make it. Yeah. We have to get together.
Yo guys in the back.
Alright, say zoning.
Okay. 1, 2, 3 zoning.
Zoning.
You guys look hot.
We need a crazy one, we need a crazy one.
Oh yeah, okay. Always.
Yeah.
Alright.
You know, it's crazy.
Alright. 1, 2, 3 crazy pig. Hold on, wait. Hold on, make new crazy stuff. Alright, there we go. Hold up to 305. Gang sign.
It's like, what is the gang signs?
I'll just take one with a selfie. It's all easy.
Okay.
There we go. Oh, Alright, guys.
You have to send it to us. Yeah. So, thank you for having us.
No problem.
I would love to read that.
Yeah, I'll bring it.
Okay.
Do I need to do anything with this?
Yeah, we need to hear about it.
Alright, I gotta get my car to you.
You know what?
What does this shit have?
But I'm just waiting for talk to
It's like a tax. Yeah, it's crazy. I was so terrified. Wow, man, that must be a white sauce. How's the white sauce? My sister and he said this picture of him. They're doing the winter. It's like you have to walk backwards. He's like, he sends a picture of it and see the skyscraper.
1 year we had a snowstorm and everyone had 4 so like their cars were in the snow.
Yeah, I mean, you want to move it for food. Oh my God, my God. My favorite place is the
Last worker was
Okay, our mission was accomplished. She got out of here a bit. Sorry about that. I'd like to take a vote what to decide to do about dinner.
Dinner.
Yeah, because I would like for us all to eat together. This class, I thought he would get out earlier, and we would all get out earlier if we didn't have dinner, but it didn't work that way. And it probably won't work that way in any of the classes because all the guests are so exciting that you're going to have more and more questions for them. So I'd like to figure out a way that we can all have dinner together. I don't care what we eat. I just think that we should. So I don't know if for the next class we want to order pizza, or I know some people don't eat pizza, but the point isn't what we eat. It's just that we're all together, and the guest lecturer would be with us too, and we're in a more informal way. Then even if we do it in the classroom, then when we start back up, it's like a more informal time to spend with me and with the guests. Yeah.
I was gonna say, for the people who don't eat pizza, Domino's also serves salads now.
But I don't know, if some people want to take on that task of organizing it.
Want some wings?
Like,
what? Beer, wings and sliders.
Uber Eats.
No, I don't care what we eat. I don't want to be involved. I don't want to be involved in that. That's for you guys to figure out. But what I'd like us to do is to have a plan. So in the beginning of class, next week, we could, collect. I don't know how much money it would be, either $5 from everybody, and just order something in.
We should contract a catering company or something. Yeah.
I can't do it, so you guys have to, if you want us to be together for that, if somebody wants to take ownership of it and do that.
Extra credits.
I can find some wings. There's a wing spot by that public over there. 3 groups, so it's easier to.
3 groups?
3 groups. One person orders for this side, another person.
No. We're not doing it like that.
Well, that's the case.
No, we eat together.
Only if you guys want to, or we'll just break and everybody will go to dinner somewhere else.
Yeah.
So it's just what you want to.
We would go to the other building and sit in the little
cafeteria.
Right, that's what I'd like us to do.
Just get whatever you want and just.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Okay.
Bring it around.
And if anybody wants to, I'm not sure that my guest lecturers are so into bring their own. So if anybody wants to chip in and eat something with the guest lecturer. Or the guest lecturer and I will probably go somewhere, because I'm not going to tell the guest lecturer to pack their own lunch,
Tell them to bring a lunchbox.
Wing spot, B&B?
Well, you guys think about it if you want to do it, so.
Is it necessary to have a dinner break?
Yeah. But you guys will have to think about what you want to do. It is necessary to have a dinner break. So what I'm going to do now is go over the best answers. Wherever my mic is. time, right?
What if you?
Anybody on my mic?
Maybe throw it by the back.
So, a lot of people did hand in the assignment, the SQ, the 7 questions. Remember, they're optional, so you don't have to do them. You know, everybody works, everybody's busy. But your midterm and your final are going to be a selection of the study questions. I think a lot of people did good work. Some people just wrote me very vague things. And vague will not get the most credit because this class is really about reading each word. You know, we're talking about, there's a whole Supreme Court case about the meaning of 2 words. So this class is really turns on reading each word, and you know, part of the skill that I want you to have is to get to be critical readers and then to apply the sections from the text or the assigned reading or you know, from our lecture to answer and support your question. So there are a lot of good papers. Demetra, her paper really spent a lot of time. I can tell she spent, did you spend a lot of time? Yeah, she spent a lot of time because she actually referenced the certain pages of the book and also of the text to support her answers. Many people did that, but a lot of people didn't do it specifically, or they just generalized. And what I'm looking for is specific references, because in law, that's what lawyers do. Or if you have a lawyer, what you want to do, if you're in an argument with the other side, is have him specifically reference the contract, the reading, the statute, whatever, to support your position. Lawyers also know how to reference the reading, the statute, the law, to support a position either way. I don't care which way you go. As a lawyer, one day you're helping somebody fight land use. The next day you're helping somebody get land use. So we know how to use the text to support our arguments each way. So it doesn't matter to me really what your answer, you know, what you choose to say, as long as you support it with reference to the text. So that's really the model that I'm looking for. Your answer doesn't have to be exactly like hers, but the style that I'm looking for is that the answer is supported with specific reference to the text. So I'm going to go over some of her answers. So it says, analyze and explain how John Locke's theories from the Second Treatise on Property are reflected in the U.S. Constitution. So she wrote, undoubtedly John Locke's theories have been the base or the skeleton of the U.S. Constitution. Locke's, quote, radical thinking is reflected in several parts of the Constitution. First, the introduction of the Constitution. We, the people of the United States, promote the general welfare and secure the blessings of liberty. Alludes to Chapter 5, Section 123, I like that, is very specific, of Locke's Second Treatise on Property, in terms of stating that the goal of the Constitution is to preserve people's lives, liberties, and estates. Second, the Fifth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution states, quote, nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Again, highlighting Locke's theories about the significant role of government in people's lives, liberty, and property at the federal level. Third, the above thoughts are also highlighted in the 19th, but I think she meant 14th Amendment. Yeah. And you always should check your work. You know, I know people are from different countries, speak different languages, but it's always best to check your work before you hand it in, but I know what you mean. 19th Amendment of the Constitution, but this time at the state level. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. Overall, Locke believes that the rights and property are the basis of human freedom and that the government exists to protect them and preserve public order have influenced the U.S. Constitution. So, you see why that's complete and how it specifically references the text. Explain the significance of the 5th and 14th Amendments to the U.S. Constitution in regard to property rights in the U.S. She writes, due process rights are established through the 5th Amendment. No person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. In particular, this due process of law requires the protection of individuals, property owners, from the violation of their fundamental rights, life, liberty, or property. It's an assurance that all legal proceedings will be fair, like, for example, a property parentheses, home, cannot be taken away, foreclosed without warning. And that's, even though she didn't reference the class lecture, I gave the class lecture, so I know it's direct reference to the class lecture. Moreover, the Fifth Amendment establishes compensation rights for owners. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation, protecting therefore the private property from the government. In the same line of thought, with the 14th Amendment, due process protection is extended to the states. Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property. Therefore, states are prohibited from violating an individual, in our case, an owner's fundamental rights. Instead, a fair process of law guarantees that all persons received equal protection is required. So, I like, the explanation, I like the thought behind it, and I like that it referred to specific parts of the reading. Say, why are property rights best understood as a bundle of sticks? Give 3 examples. The term bundle of sticks is a metaphor that successfully describes the bundle of rights, also referred to as interests, associated with the ownership and use of the site and improvements, i.e. disposition, use, possession, and exclusion, as well as their interconnections with other parties that the owner may or may not have chosen to. In general, intangible property rights, such as exclusive possession, enjoyment of a use or benefit, use, expand, collect, rent, harvest, freedom to dispose as one pleases within the limits of safety, are retained by the owner of the real property. In this context, the most complete bundle of rights is the free, simple, absolute, subject to limitations exposed by the government or prior owners. And then she tells me that she got this from the Lee and Archer book, which is one of your assigned readings, 24 through 25. So I like that reference. But then she says, however, several situations exist when the property rights are connected with other parties and therefore limiting one's ownership. For example, a lease is a stick from an owner's bundle, but also gives the tenant the right to use the building land. And I like that because I walked around the room with a bunch of sticks, and she's referring to the lecture, so she's using that to support her answer. Similarly, a mortgage, a lien, is a stick from the owner's point of view, bundle, but also a right to foreclose from the lender's viewpoint. Lastly, an easement is a right someone has to use the land of another for a special purpose consistent with the general use of land. And then, again, she's quoting Lee and Archer specifically where it comes from. So I really like the answer. Do you guys see why?
Yes.
It's referencing the book, the readings, but it's also referencing the class. And my questions are not canned questions, like they don't come from the back of a book. So they kind of require you to do more work because it's all kinds of readings, and I'm asking you to synthesize that with what's going on around us. Let's see. Reference the Wall Street Journal article attached. Identify the property rights, property sticks. Which are the rights in dispute? As stated in the article, in China, urban land is owned by the state, and farmland belongs to rural collected by village officials. Considering the above situation, therefore, it seems that most of the real property is state-owned, and therefore, all of the property sticks, disposition, use, possession, and exclusion, of the Chinese landowners are in dispute. In other words, there's no fee simple for the owners. So I thought that was well said, right? Moreover, Chinese local governments can acquire farmland for construction projects that are, quote, in the public interest, in exchange for compensation based on multiple of the land's agricultural yield rather than its market value. Therefore, the main problem of mass unrest in China is the mistreatment by the local government, the local officials misappropriating farmland and selling it to property developers at enormous profit that the farmers never see. As a result of these illegal land seizures, the taking of property and just compensation, eminent domain, are also in dispute. So you can explain it to me any way, but I'm looking for you to explain it to me with reference to our readings and, rationale, thought, and reference to the article, and that's what she did. Question? Okay. How would this situation explained in the Wall Street Journal be different if it had happened in the U.S.? Explain who would own the land and the property rights. In the U.S., normally both the land and the property rights are retained by the owner of the real property. since most of it is privately owned. However, the U.S. government has the right to take property ownership of privately held real estate regardless of the owner's wishes. This is called eminent domain. And then she's quoting me, Lincoln Archer 88 to 89, again reference to the text. And legal proceeding involved in it, in the condemnation where the property owner must be paid the fair market value of the property taken from him instead of a multiple of the land's agricultural yield, as described in the Chinese case. In our new assignment, the readings will be the Supreme Court cases, right? And you can also refer to Lincoln Archer, and you can also refer to the articles that I sent, and you can also refer to our lecture. Argue how the 5th and 14th Amendments could be applied to the situation described in the Wall Street Journal if it happened in the U.S. Through the 5th Amendment, due process rights would have been established. The Chinese owners would have had the opportunity to protect their properties from the corrupt local officials. They would have avoided the violation of their fundamental property rights since, quote, due process is an assurance that all legal proceedings will be reasonable and fair. Moreover, the 5th Amendment would have given the owners the opportunity to receive, quote, just compensation based on the highest and best use. Again, quoting Lincoln Archer, page 90. Therefore, protecting their private property from the Chinese local government's ignorance of the right market value of their property. For example, negotiations between property owner and public agent who wants to acquire the ownership would have taken place within the framework of condemnation. If both parties would arrive at a mutually acceptable price, the property would have been sold. If an agreement could not be reached, a proceeding in eminent domain would have been filed against the property in a court of law. It's very well explained, right? Similarly, and given that the 14th Amendment is an extension of the due process to states, the Chinese central government would have also been prohibited from violating the owner's fundamental property rights. Importantly, we would have a guarantee of fair process of the law that all individuals receive equal protection. For example, the Chinese central government could draft new legislation that would protect against land grabs and give farmers a market rate for their land, and perhaps even intervene in the persecution of the local corrupted officials by creating new statewide rules for the special cases. So I really like when people say, like, for example, I really like that she gave me some thought about how, remember this class, we're a little bit of a focus on Florida, but Florida's just our example. But we're talking about principles that apply, nationwide or worldwide. So she's coming up with ideas from what we learned that could apply over there. And I like that because it's showing me that she's thinking about the case, right? And what we're reading. Based on the readings to date, as an investor, what are the most important legal protections the U.S. offers for private property? Explain why you chose these. The most important legal protections the U.S. offers for private property come from the 5th Amendment of the Constitution, which states that no person shall be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. The first clause is important because it gives the right of due process of law, therefore providing an assurance that investors will not be denied justice in any adjudicatory proceedings. The second clause, the takings clause, is also an assurance that the investor's property will not be seized by governments without payment of fair compensation. You could choose anything. You could choose 5 and 14, always safe choices for me, because I like 5 and 14, they're my favorite. I even made a slide that said 5 and 14 are my favorite. And you can explain that 5 and 14 really wouldn't mean anything if there wasn't police and a judiciary that enforces it. And you can reference the discussion that we had about the no trespassing sign. You can choose whatever you want. You can just, what I'm looking for is that you back up whatever your answer is, right? If you chose, you could say, I choose the police and I choose the judiciary because they have to go through the due process of 5 and 14. So you can choose different ways. You don't have to word the answer exactly the way she did, but that's the style that I'm looking for. Questions so far? Okay. You are allowed to take notes and mark up your answer now if you want to, right? Because remember that your exam is going to be a selection of the questions that we go over together. With reference to our class discussion and readings, if someone were to grant you a property, would you prefer a specific grant or a general grant? Why? Well, I would definitely prefer a specific grant because a general grant would not give me any specific property rights, disposition, use, possession, exclusion, thus not only limiting my ownership, but also creating potential chaos in my life, liberty, or property. You can always be funny. Your professor reads like 60, 70 exams of you all combined with your online students and another 70 for my undergrad. Humor's always allowed. I like it. Therefore, as a grantee, recipient of the real property, I would expect from the grantor, the person or entity conveying the real property, to provide me a deed, which is a written contract conveying permanent interest in the real property. Again, showing me she knows, where grantor or grantee is, and also quoting to Lane Archer. But you also, and I don't think he's here tonight, Sebastian Bagliano, you also could tell me, what question was that? You could also answer the question like this. According to discussion in class, and as seen as the Genesis reading, there is a general grant already given in line 28 to all man. And I like, again, that it references class and specifically references the reading, right? The lack of specificity of this grant makes it unenforceable, so it's always preferred to receive a specific grant in the form of a deed that has all the required elements. These elements are grantor with a signature, grantee, recital of their consideration, words of conveyance, covenants, habendum clause, exception and reservations clause, if any, description of the land, acknowledgement, and delivery. And it would be further preferred to get a general or special warranty deed or any quality deed where the full bundle of sticks is received. So it's a different answer than her to answer, but it's still full credit because it's specifically referring to both the class lecture and the text, right? And it's showing me the application of the lesson. Let's see. Explain what you think John Locke would think about condo developers. Remember to reference a specific text to support your answer. Do you think he is right? I think John Locke would like the industrious nature of condo developers. Section 34 of the Second Treatise of Property states, and again, I like it, that they're telling me specifically the section, and then they're giving me a quote to support it, that God gave the world to men in common, but since he gave it to them for their benefit and the greatest conveniences of life they were capable to draw from it, it cannot be supposed he meant it should always remain common and uncultivated. He gave it to the use of the industrious and rational, and labor was to be his title to it, not to the fancy or covetousness or the quarrelsome and contentious. Also, he would have approved the fact that condo developers try to optimize the usage from the land. In section 37, again a specific reference to Locke, John Locke also mentions the importance of generating value through labor. Quote, to which let me add that he who appropriates land to himself by his labor does not lessen but increase the common stock of mankind. For the provision serving to support of human life produced by 1 acre of enclosed and cultivated land are, parentheses, to speak much within compass, 10 times more than those which are yielded by an acre of land of an equal richness lying waste in common. Even if condos are not land to be cultivated, the concept that would be supported is that land will be improved by development and enhancing its efficiency value. That being said, I believe that he would be opposed to them given the way that they are profiting today. So his answer, I would have taken it just an A. I would have been good. But the second paragraph, he's really impressing me because he's showing me that he supported it, but now he's showing me a hole in the theory that he's also going to use Locke to prove that there's a hole in the theory. Question.
So for that question, is there a right answer? Isn't it how you interpret?
There's not a right answer, but the right answer, whatever your answer is, it's going to specifically refer to the text to argue your answer. So he writes, that being said, I believe he would be opposed to them given the way they are profiting today. He talks in these texts extensively about the inequality of possessions generated by the use of money. First in section 37, quote, this is certain, that in the beginning, before the desire of having more than man needed had altered the intrinsic value of things, which depends only on their usefulness to the life of man, or had agreed that a little yellow metal, which would keep without wasting or decay, should be worth a great piece of flesh, or a whole heap of corn. And most clearly on section 51, his labor upon, so he had no temptation to labor for more than he can make use of. This left no room for controversy about the title, nor for encroachment on the right of others. What portion a man carved to himself was easily seen, and it was useless, as well as dishonest, to carve himself too much, or to take more than he needed. So I know that this answer took a long time to write. Because this person, they didn't quote me all of John Locke. Sometimes people just like to quote me a whole page of John Locke. And that's just, it's not careful reading. But this person argued one way with John Locke, and then argued the other way with John Locke, and they gave me very specific answers. And that's what I'm looking for. That's the top type of analysis that I'm looking for with the readings. And then he answered more. Because then I asked him, do you think he's right? Right? So he wrote, I believe he is conceptually right in the detriment money has to mankind, and agree with the statement. In section 31, quote, that nothing was made by God for man to spoil or destroy. Considering how mankind is slowly destroying our environment, and the economic inequalities that generate poor living conditions, and even lack of food and water to some communities, it's hard to argue with this position. However, the world is gearing towards more conscious development in real estate and otherwise. Technology, education, and a more humane approach in newer generations might bring us closer to John Locke's vision. That is a complete and very thoughtful answer, right? And it took some time to write and to sift through Locke to get those thoughts together. So that's what I'm looking for. I think that there's more. What?
Was that assignment or that answer more than 3 or 4?
I don't think it was.
No, that answer was obviously less than pages, but I feel like his whole thing probably wasn't pages. It wasn't.
Stick to the requirements.
Yeah.
I would still give it a very top grade. So let's see. I think that was it, right? That's all my questions that I asked you. 9. So that's what I'm looking for, and that the pattern is what I'm looking for, the specific reference to the text. And really, if you pay attention in class, and if you take notes on the text that I'm highlighting to you to read in class, it's not, you already have your guide of what I want in the answer. Like tonight, where I was having you read specific sections of the Supreme Court case, on my slides that seemed funny were really to help you remember those things. Because remember, they're very little pictures and legal documents. So I'm really giving you the guide. And like I said, this class is not about tricking anybody. Most people earn an A or an A- in this class. They just do. I don't grade on a curve. Because we go over all the answers together, right? So if your answer wasn't that specific, you see for the next time or for your midterm the specificity that I'm looking for. So that's that. And your midterm is going to be like 10 or 12 questions, and your final is going to be 10 or 12 questions. And they're all going to be questions that we've already gone over the answers to. So it's not meant to be stressful. And sometimes people miss a week, they have a busy work week, they have a busy family week, and they miss a week, but come to class and write down the thing that you missed, because that's the opportunity. We have 3 times to learn this information, maybe 4, because in the classroom, then you have the questions that you can take a stab at, then we go over it together, and then you'll see some of them and get on your exam. So it's really like a way to reinforce it. Some people give me their answers in red. I don't like answers in red because it's just weird. Just give me your answers in black or blue ink. It's okay. And then some people give me their answers and they don't put the question on top. And what happens with that sometimes is that they miss part of the question. So I would just leave the question on top and give me the answer below, because sometimes my questions have more than 1 or 2 parts. So don't just give me the answer without the question on top. And that's it. And remember to include your name. Sometimes people don't include their name. See you on the boat tour. And be sure to RSVP for the developer luncheon. And if anybody has an idea about what to do about this dinner situation, let me know. You should bring sunglasses, a notebook if you want to take notes. You can take as many photographs as you want. We're on a boat, it's outside. The top is covered, but the sides are open. Business casual, there's no AC, so it can be hot. Yeah, and we can't wait for people who are late, because we have a big crowd.
Yeah, I'm gonna go. Oh, I have one.
There's a big part. Where's thank you.